The target may have been a surprise. The type of missile used was not. Weeks of speculation that the British would allow the Storm Shadow to be used by Ukraine inside Russia came to an end today. Russian military bloggers circulated this video saying it was the Franco-British long-range cruise missile being used in Kursk. We can't verify that. If this was the Storm Shadow, though, what is striking, the number of these bunker-busting aircraft-launched missiles used. They're over £1 million a pop. This would suggest that this was a very high-value target. The Storm Shadow has a range of about 150 miles. It's made in Britain and France, but the targeting and location data programmed into the missile is owned by the US, so today's strike is highly unlikely to have happened without a green light from Washington.
If you were Ukraine and the UK and others, you wouldn't want to talk exactly about how this has all been configured and what information is provided when. But fundamentally, it's likely that to get the best possible targeting information, at some point the US would have to agree to release information.
Yesterday, the American ATACMS system was used for the first time by Ukraine to hit targets in Russia proper, after Joe Biden finally gave permission, hesitating for months over fear of escalation and worries about whether its use in Russia would meaningfully shift the dial or not. Once that happened, just a matter of time before the British equivalent was deployed in this way as well. This week has all been about missiles, which is important, but the biggest problem the Ukrainian military have is something else.
It's that they have a mobilization and recruitment and training problem. They simply don't have enough people going through the system and on the line at the moment. The numbers game of people is critical to Ukraine's long-term viability.
It was this issue that Ukrainian soldiers wanted to talk to us about last month near the eastern front line in Donbass. Just a month on, this area is now under Russian control. As we left in October, new Ukrainian fortifications as far as the eye could see, bracing for the possibility of the front line buckling.
Warwick O'Brien reporting, well, even as reports of the Storm Shadow strikes were emerging, the Defence Secretary was in the House of Commons announcing cuts to naval ships, drones and helicopters. Our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, joins us from Westminster. Paul.
Yeah, usually when a government starts a speech to Parliament with a warning of, quote, increased global threats, you expect a big announcement of more funding, not £500 million worth of cuts. Ships, drones and helicopters all being scrapped. Now, quite a few sources today saying actually the Defence Secretary had a reasonable argument for each of those. For instance, HMS Bulwark and HMS Albion are two ships being scrapped. They haven't been used at sea for years, they're costing millions, and they were due to be scrapped anyway, so that's been sped up. But it means the UK will have no amphibious assault ships. 17 Puma helicopters, the oldest 52 years old, 14 CH-47 Chinooks, some 37 years old, they're going. You can understand the argument for getting rid of outdated kit when finances are looking tight. But if there's one lesson that's been shown time again from the war in Ukraine, it's that when push comes to shove, often old kit is better than no kit.
Well, speaking of Ukraine, might they be getting some of this?
No decisions have been made yet on that. The government simply don't know what they're going to be doing with the kit that's going. But the surprising thing, talking to senior and retired military sources, not the anger and outrage you would usually expect, but almost sighs of resignation. A few of them, though, pointed out two things. Firstly, the Defence Secretary recommitted that 2.5% of GDP being spent on defence, but no timeline. And secondly, a few of them pointing out this one line buried at the bottom of his speech, quote, "These will not be the last difficult decisions I will have to make to fix the defence inheritance that we were left." The military's biggest fear for forces they say which have already been hollowed out, yet more cuts ahead.
Paul McNamara. Well, the Labour MP, Tandesi, chairs the Defence Select Committee and joins me now from Westminster. Do you think MPs should have got more of a say in whether Storm Shadow should be used by Ukraine, given it now clearly crosses the red line drawn by Russia on its use of nuclear weapons?
Well, Christian, I think we would all acknowledge that we live in an increasingly volatile and dangerous world, and that is an issue that has become more and more to the fore, whether it's in terms of Russia's illegal invasion within our continent. We've got now the increased the escalation of deployment of North Korean troops on European soil. We've got increased conflict, whether it's in the Middle East, across the Sahel, other parts of Africa and Asia, and of course we've got the issues and the tensions around the Indo-Pacific. So within that wider context, if we are to provide support to Ukraine, as I've said on the floor of the House since last month, many of us have been saying that we should be obviously giving strong, solid support to Ukraine, our friends and allies, but at the same time, they should not be out there defending themselves with one hand tied behind their backs.
Yeah, but this is a very specific thing.
Not just give them the equipment.
I mean, Storm Shadow the use of Storm Shadow is seen by Russia as specifically breaking its new nuclear doctrine, which is the assistance of a non-nuclear power by a nuclear power, and they say they will then view that as a joint attack, which potentially makes British targets, the focus of Russian interest. Now, the British government seems to be just operating on the basis that that's a bluff. It won't happen. And MPs haven't really had an opportunity to discuss that.
Look, Christian, we've had a lot of unuseful rhetoric and diatribe from Russia before, even when we provided support to Ukraine. Initially, we had an increase in the sound bites coming out from Putin. We've had that constantly, even when we provided
so you just don't believe
with
it?
More military equipment or with aid. So I think over the last 3 years, if that's something that we have seen constantly, is that's what we are going to be getting from Putin. What we need to do is to supply the military and other aid to Ukraine, and we must advise them that, look, this equipment obviously has to be used within the confines of international humanitarian law.
Now, the opposition and right-wing press, it should be said, are attacking the government over these cuts. Now, they come with the backing of the service chiefs, but it's not a good look, is it, when you might be entering a new phase of a war with Russia when Britain's getting rid of £500 million worth of weapons?
Look, as I said on the floor of the House when I was questioning the Secretary of State after he'd made his statement, that overall I welcome these changes, these reforms, because many of these reforms to the operations of the MOD, the military, the Ministry of Defence, they are long overdue. It is important that we get rid of older platforms and transition to newer equipment. But at the same time, what we must ensure is that our people are supported, so that how are they reskilled and retrained to use that newer equipment. And at the same time, what I asked him is that some of this equipment, is that going to be sold to either allies or is that going to be given to Ukraine? We need that investment in newer technology, those newer pieces of equipment, rather than relying on things which, as your reporter mentioned earlier, have sometimes not been out for years. So being docked on the shores of the UK is not as much use to us as if we are investing in newer bits of kit. So I think it's important that that's what we do.
Tandesi, thank you very much indeed.